Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Hayemi. Mesachas CHULLIN Daf Ayin Vav. We begin right on top of the Mishnah, and actually we're back to the Hilchos Treifos. Here's another type of injury which would render the animal as a treifa, which makes it forbidden for consumption. Says the Mishnah, an animal whose hind legs were amputated, totally removed. Does that make the animal a treifa? Is that considered a life-threatening, critical injury? Well, it depends how high up on the leg. Min ha'arkuva ulamata. Arkuva is a term used to describe like the joint, like a knee area. You see, Rashi explains the hind leg of an animal is comprised of 3 primary bones. So starting from the bottom up, aside from the actual foot, the hoof, but above that, it's 1, a joint, 2, another joint, and then comes 3, the thigh bone. Arkuva is a joint. Now, we're going to see in the Gemara exactly which one we're talking about. But in the meantime, the Mishnah says, if this happened, if this severance happened in min arkuva lamata, beneath the arkuva, although a serious injury, but not considered life-threatening, the animal is still okay. Min arkuva lamata, kshir. But if it's further up, min arkuva lamalo, then the animal is considered severely damaged, severely injured to the point that it is psula, is considered a treifa. Okay, that's the first part of the Mishnah. Number 2, v'chein shenital tzomis hagidin. Likewise, if this cluster, tzomis is a cluster of gidin, of these sinews, of these nerves, which are present actually right above the first joint, between leg 1, counting from bottom up, so it's 1, 2, and 3, between 1 and 2, right at that joint, right above that joint, is where the tzomis hagidin is situated. Cluster of 3 nerves start off coming out of that joint area, hugging the bone, and then eventually split, come apart, and soften up and get embedded into the flesh above. So where it's still clustered together, that's critical to the animal's survival. And if it's cut over there, that also makes the animal a treif. Third part of the Mishnah is nishbar etzem. In this case, there was no amputation, there was no damage to the tzomis hagidin, but there was a clean break, clean fracture on the hind leg, all the way through, right? Completely broke. Im roiv habasar kayim. If most of the basar, the flesh around that break area, is still there, so the bone is still encased mostly, so the shechita of the animal is matar the aver, which means to say, it's still included in the greater animal picture, and the shechita of the animal pertains to the leg as well, even to the partially detached portion. But otherwise, if it's not encased by flesh, it's considered detached, separated. Ein shechitosem tarosai. So in this case, the shechita on the animal will not accommodate that dangling limb. Okay, so we have 3 parts to the Mishnah. Number 1 was an amputation. Above the arkuva, puzzle. Below the arkuva, still okay. Number 2 is if there was damage to the tzomis hagidin, that's a treifa. Number 3, if there was a break just on the bone. It depends if it was encased, mostly encased or not. Okay, so back to the first halacha. We had a term called arkuva. What is that? Which joint? Between bones 1 and 2, going up from bottom up, 1 and 2, or is it between 2 and 3? Let's call it the first joint, which is lower down, or the second joint further up. Amar bida marab, Amar b'chia, he calls her b'chia. When the Mishnah speaks about arkuva, it's the first one. And when the Mishnah says that the amputation occurred below, it means below that first knee, that first joint. Lamata means lamata min arkuba. In this case, it's safe. Lamala, when it's talking about above, lamala min arkuba, above the joint, in that case, it's treif. Okay, so below the arkuva, it's safe. Above that, it's treif. Be'ezai arkuva amru, which arkuva are we talking about? That's the joint that connects to the first bone by arkuva and mekeres hamarosh. And it's called as such, as Rashi explains, because that bone on bottom doesn't have basar around it, so the butchers disregard it. They just throw it in with the head. When they sell the head, they throw in that bottom piece as well. Okay, so according to Omar Vidam Arav, if it's below the first joint, it's safe. Above that, it's treif. He says, no, we're talking about the second joint, further up. In fact, this second joint protrudes in a camel. So this very same spot, this very same limb, this very same joint would be discernible by a camel. That's a good way to know which one it is. It's the further up one. And on that, the Mishnah says, if the leg was amputated above that area, that's really critical, and that makes it a treifa. But below that, it's still safe, provided you didn't interfere with the tzemis hagidin. Okay, so the amputation occurred above the tzemis hagidin in that middle section, that middle bone. Interesting. So you can cut off the whole bone, the whole leg, and the animal can still be safe, provided you didn't actually cut through the tzemis hagidin, which clearly is a more dangerous proposition. There's swelling. It's not going to reheal. It's going to get infected. Whatever the reason is. So ironically, you can go further down and be worse off. Okay, in any case, that's Ula Rav Yisha's opinion. Amali Ula Rav Yehuda. So now Ula turns to Rav Yehuda. Let's compare notes. Certainly according to my perspective, where I say that the Arkuva in the Mishnah is speaking about joint number 2 further up, which is visible by the camel, Kenegdoi B'Gamal Nikor. That explains the wording of the Mishnah. Hainu Diktoni. That explains why the Mishnah had to highlight another form of treifa. So according to my understanding, if the amputation took place above that upper joint, treifa. Below the joint, which means anywhere in that middle bone, it's okay, provided you didn't interfere with the tzemis hagidin. That's another variation of treifa. So there's a need for the Mishnah to highlight this new variation. So although it's taking place in that middle bone, which we would perceive as being the safe zone, but it's not so if, in fact, you interfere with the tzemis hagidin. That's more critical. It gets infected, whatever it is, it's more critical to the situation. But according to your approach, that the focus is on the first joint. And the Mishnah is teaching, below that joint, we're safe. Anywhere above that, right above that, it's treif. So right above that middle joint, what's going on there? That's where the nerves are situated. So once the Mishnah mentions that if it's amputated above that joint, which means the bone and the nerves, that makes it treifa, then why does the Mishnah need to highlight both variations? Let us just say, well, if the nerves were shot, then that's enough to make it a treifa. Why go and tell us, well, if a full amputation, the bone with the nerves were cut, it's a treifa, and then say, well, the nerves were cut, it's also a treifa. Just say the second case, and of course the first. According to you, that the injury took place right above that first joint, which is the area of the tzemis hagidin. What do you have to repeat and say, well, likewise, if the tzemis hagidin were injured? Armalezi says, I'll tell you why. Two different cases. First, we'd speak about ruchuba b'lei tzemis hagidin. Ruchuba is the bone was cut without the nerves. That's one form of treifa. The second one is v'tzemis hagidin b'lei revucha, where the tzemis hagidin were cut without the bone. Two variations of treifa. So he says, no, but look at the wording of the Mishnah about nechtechu katani. The Mishnah clearly speaks about a full amputation, not a part cut. Ishtik didn't have an answer. After Ula left the room, Amar Sarvida was thinking to himself, he was sort of contemplating, he says, so he says to himself, Amar, my time amrle. Why didn't I respond to him like this? That when the Mishnah says lamata, below that first joint, lamata min arkuba, means right below that joint, anywhere in that first bone, it's safe. And when the Mishnah says lamala, above, so if the amputation occurred further up, it doesn't mean immediately above that joint where the nerves are located. It means further up in that second bone, lamala mitzvah, above the tzemesagidin. And that explains why the Mishnah had to highlight both variations, both scenarios of treifa. Whether the amputation occurred further up on that bone, it makes it treifa, even there was no full amputation, but the tzemes hagidin were cut, that's also going to generate treifa. So that would explain why the Mishnah had to highlight both cases. Talking about different locations within the same section, but in the first case it was an amputation on the bone further above the cluster of the gidin, so it wasn't directly on the tzemes hagidin. That's one form of treifa. Or even lower down near the joint where the tzemes hagidin is situated, that in itself, just injuring the tzemes hagidin itself, can make treifa. So that's what Ravida was saying to himself. He regretted why, not having responded in this fashion. Hadar Amar. Then he came back and says, actually, good thing I didn't say. It would have been pointless. Look, I already tried. I attempted to answer him, and he came back with the, with the wording of the Mishnah, which wasn't consistent, right? Hadar Amar, he says, well, didn't I already attempt to resolve this issue, to respond to his question? He told me, no, nechtechu katani, right? Remember I said, well, maybe it was just the bone without the nerves without the bone. He says, oh, nechtechu. It says nechtechu, which means fully amputated. So once we're going to sort of focus on the literal semantics of the Mishnah, then I wouldn't be able to, I wouldn't be successful with this suggestion either. Hachanami here as well, for me to say that the term, lamala, above the joint, doesn't mean immediately above the joint where the gidin are. That was problematic. It means further up. Hachanami, he would have responded, no, Mishnah says right above the joint. So he would have gotten me stuck anyways. It wouldn't have been a successful proposition. Okay, so at this point, we have a difference of opinion in terms of what the Mishnah had in mind. Below the Arkuva, we're safe. Above that, we're treif. According to Ravida Marav, we're speaking about the first joint. Okay, again, the hind leg has three primary bones, starting from the top. From the bottom up, it's 1, 2, and 3. Between 1 and 2, we have one Arkuva. Between 2 and 3, a second one. According to Ravida Marav, we're speaking about the first one. Below that, you're okay. Above that is treif. According to Ula Amar Veishia, it's the second joint that we're talking about, and above that is treif, and below that, anywhere on that middle section, that middle bone is okay, provided he did not interfere with this hemisagid. Rav Papa, however, Masnihach, he had a different version of Rav Yehuda Marav, which puts it in line with Ula. No machlekes. They're both speaking about the same location. Rav Papa Masnihachi. Amar Rav Yehuda Marav. Amar Bechia. Lamata. So, according to this version, Arkuva is referring to that second joint, like Ula learned. And when the Mishnah says lamata, below that it's okay, lamata means lamata man arkuva, umi temes hagidin. So below means all the way, drop down all the way below the arkuva and the tzemes hagidin, meaning all the way down to the first bone. That's safe. When the Mishnah says lamala makes treifa, lamala min arkuva, umi tzemes hagidin. It means above the arkuva and tzemes hagidin, mean all the way up in the third section on top. And the Mishnah continues. V'chein shenitel tzemes hagidin. Now in this middle section, it depends. Sometimes it's a treifa, sometimes not. Depends if you interfere with tzemes hagidin. So if the cut took place further down on that middle section where the tzemes hagidin is situated, it's a treifa. But further up, it's okay. V'arkuva gufa, and the actual translation of the word arkuva kedula as ula amarvesha, which is that we're talking about that second joint. Now, ask the Gemara a question. Isn't this ironic? Within that middle bone, if you hit the tzemes hagidin, which is further down near the joint, terrible. But if you amputate that leg further up in that section, it's okay. How could you do that? How could you say so? Further up is closer to the source, closer to the actual animal. If anything, it's worse. Umi kamida, how can you have a situation? Ilu madli. Madli means you lift, you rise. Pasakle, and you chop off the leg at that point. V'chaya, the animal survives. Mitasi means you drop down, further down. Pasakle, and chop it there by the tzemes hagidin. Umeisa, now it's going to die? Marvasha, yeah. We don't compare, we don't match up treifa situations. It's all based on Halacha Moshe Sinai. It's not given to rationalization or logic. Omar Vashi. Treifa is commit damis ladadi. You're trying to compare treifa conditions to each other. We never say, but treifas regarding treifas, zudav, this is comparable to that. We don't do that. Look, I'll highlight this point by showing you that sometimes you can cut in one area, like by the tubes, simanan, the animal dies. You cut on the other side, on the hip or something, on the shoulder, and it lives. So you can't compare. Okay, so in summation, in the first halacha in the Mishnah we learned, after there was an amputation that occurred below the arkuva, the animal is okay, above that it's treif. We had two understandings of the term arkuva. According to the initial version of Rabbi Marav, and Rashi actually says we paskin like that. We're speaking about the first joint, below that is okay, anywhere above that is treif. So if it's a full amputation, it's treif. And likewise, if the tzemes hagidin were shot, were cut, even without interfering with the bone, it's also a form of treif. Whereas according to Ulam Rav Aishia, we're speaking, the focus is on the next joint further up. Above that is treif. Below that is okay, provided there was no interference with the tzemes hagidin. Okay, so we speak so much about the tzemes hagidin. Exactly where is this situated? And Rashi explains. You have to know, understand the anatomy of the animal. So we have the first joint, let's call it like the first knee. And that's where the arkuva, right? And there's another term for that joint bone, arkuma, the Gemara calls it. Arkuma. So that's an actual, like a bone that joins together the two sections. And that's what spits out these nerves. That's where it comes from. And the nerves, initially they hug the bone right above the knee. And then, for a little while, and then they sort of separate from the bone. They proceed as a cluster until they get back, further up, and it separates, it softens, becomes more tissuey and fleshy, and gets embedded in the bus or in the flesh above. At that point, it's no longer tzemes hagidin. Tzemes hagidin is only where it's hard and clustered, closer to the actual bone. So exactly where are we talking about? Ve'elu hein tzemes hagidin. Which section exactly is considered tzemes hagidin? So we have several opinions. Rabbah quotes Amar Rashi, garma is the bone. The garma is the bone. So, as we explained, initially the nerves sort of hug the bone, and then they separate from that bone. So according to this opinion, the tzemes hagidin refers to where it separates from the bone. Ulavar. Dargarma ulavar, leaving the bone, out, going out. Rabba bar Rav Huna Rav Ashi has a different quote from Rav Ashi. Dargarma ulagav. Actually, he says it's only where they actually hug the bone itself, from there down to the joint. Rav Breda Rabba Rav Huna Amar Ravasi, Di'ilu arkuma. He takes it down even further. That's the arkuma, the little joint bone. He said anything above that is already called Tzemes Hagidin. So Rashi says this is a broader, more expansive shiur than the previous opinions. Yosef Ha'um Rabban, there was this Chacham who was sitting Kamei Rav Abba. Yosef was sitting and saying over the arkuma gufa, that Tzemes Hagidin is where the Gidin were cut right at the arkuma itself, that joint bone. Amar Lei says, no, that's going way too far down. So Rabbi tells him, like, don't pay attention to this opinion. It only begins where the butchers begin to that's where they open up the leg to skin that which is for a little bit further up. Behind Rava Breda Rabba Rav Huna, as per that opinion we had before, right above the arkuma. That's where it starts. Okay. Amar Rav Asi, Amar Vida Mashmuel. Tzemes Hagidin. She'amru. The Tzemes Hagidin that we speak about in the Mishnah. Where does it start? Mokem Shagidin Tzemsen, where the sinews, where the nerves cluster together. So he's working with the opinion that it starts from the arkum, from the knee, and up. Va'at kam. So you have the starting point. What about the end? How far does it go? Amar lahu hahu midrabban. So this Chacham, whose name was Rav Yaakov Shmei, he says, I'll tell you how I know. Ki avinan bei Rav Yehuda. When we were in the Beis Medrash of Rav Yehuda, Amarlan, he would tell us, Shemo min hamilsa. Please listen to me. Listen to what I'm going to say. The Megaver Rabba Shmuel. I heard it from a great man. Who? Umanu, who is the great man Shmuel. He gave us the exact parameters in terms of what's considered the end zone, what's considered the Tzemes Hagidin She'amru, the Tzemes Hagidin that we speak about, Mokim Shagidin Tzemsin Boy, right, where it starts clustering. Mokim She'Tzemsin Boy. And from that spot, until Mokim Shem is spashed, until they start separating and branching out. At that point, it's no longer considered Tzemes Hagidin, it's no longer so critical. The injury there is not considered life-threatening. The kam. Okay, how far is that? Amar Abaye, arba batadi. Bati means a finger width. So 4 finger widths. That's how long it's going to be. And past that point, it's no longer regarded as Tzemes Hagidin, but Torah, and this is by an ox, a big, huge animal. What about a lighter animal, a small animal, where proportionally everything is smaller? Remember dakamai. Amar Abaye, I can't give you an exact, length. Blite. Take a close look at the nerves, and you'll see if it's blite, if they're protruding, they're clearly visible, they're not yet embedded in the flesh, then that's the habu Tzemes Hagidin. Believe if they're embedded in the flesh, lo yahav, they're no longer considered Tzemes Hagidin. Another example, ashuni, if they're hard, havu, they're considered Tzemes Hagidin. Rekich, if they're soft, then lo yahav, they're not considered Tzemes Hagidin. Alime, they're thick. Havu, they're considered Tzemes Hagidin. Continue, once they thin out, lo yahavu, they're not considered Tzemes Hagidin. Chibri, if they're stark white, havu Tzemes Hagidin. Lo chibri, otherwise, lo yahavu Tzemes Hagidin. Return Talmud Bavli. Mabar Rav Ashi Amar, he says white doesn't really have to be stark white, as long as they're transparent white. Given the zigi, they're like translucent white. Even though they're not stark white, they're considered Tzemes Hagidin. Okay, so we learned that wherever these Tzemes Hagidim are, if they're cut, they're injured, they're considered treifa. Now, what extent injury are we talking about? So we want to know there are 3 of these nerves. One is a thicker one, and 2 sort of mini ones, thinner ones. There are 3 of these strings. One is a thicker one, and 2 smaller ones. So it depends. If sig alima, the thick one was snapped, as the Rav Binyan. So most of the the material is gone, so that's a treifa. Right? You have one big one and two small ones. So the big one encompasses, the majority of the material in terms of the total material of 3. If the 2 small ones got snapped, that's also a reason for treifa, as the Rav Binyan. So now in terms of numbers, 2 out of 3 was snapped, that also makes it treifa. So either way, either it's numbers or the quantity. Mar bar Rav Ashi Maslan L'Kula, he had a lenient version of this halacha. It's the opposite. You need both factors. You need substance and quantity. If sik alima, just because the big one snapped, that's not an issue. You still have most in terms of numbers. You have the 2 that are still intact. And vice versa, if the 2 small ones snapped, you still have a majority because you have the big one there, which encompasses more than 50%. So that's regarding a behema. He has a total of 3 of these strings. What about by a bird, by a chicken? You have a total of 16. And even if one snaps, it's gone. If one snaps, treif. There was a story of Abba was standing in front of my father, Rav Ashi, and the lady brought a chicken, a shayla. They brought a chicken for him to check. Ubadak, and he counted the strings. He only found 15, so one was missing. So what did he do? He didn't just give up. Took out his lab equipment. So he noticed that one of these strings was a bit different, looked a little thicker. Navtze, so he crushed it, he banged at it, and it split into 2. He discovered his missing string, and he found 2. Amar, it reminds me of the story, the Beis HaLevi. So this woman came to him, a man came to him Erev Pesach. He says, Rebbe, what? I have a shayla, could I, the Dalet Kaisis tonight, could I dispense my obligation with milk, 4 cups of milk? Is that okay? Is that acceptable instead of wine? The Rav didn't respond. He pulled open his drawer, pulled out an envelope. He says, "Take $100. Buy yourself some basar, some meat for Yom Tov." He won't be asking this shayla. Obviously, he wasn't going to be fleshik. So you have to have a Rav with insight who can see past, the question at hand. So buy yourself some meat, and then you'll drink wine as well. Amar b'damarav. Okay, again back to the what extent was this damage? Most, the majority. Now what does it mean, the majority? My rubai. So he's very machmer according to this opinion. Even if one of the strings was mostly severed, that's enough to make it a treifa. That was a reader quoting Rav. And we know after he learned by Rav, he went to learn by Shmuel. Kamrisa came into Shmuel. When related Rav's chumrah to Shmuel, even one Amarli says, no, michti, look, we have a total of 3 strings there. Just because one snapped, lagamri completely, you could trade, just left 2 intact. That's enough to go. Says the Gemara, let's infer from Shmuel, time of the trade, but that's only because you have 2 intact. So you save the day. If you have no 2 intact, it's not enough to have just 1. This is in dispute with Rabbanoi, who have a different version of Shmuel, that even 1 string intact is okay. The Amar of Noyam Shmuel, they quote Shmuel, by the time if you have only just 1, and it's not even complete, it's like like a wool thread that you used to reinforce the neck hole of a beged. So even that's okay. There was another version of Rabbi Yehuda quoting Rav. My Rubai, when he says Roiv is a problem, Roiv k'lechad ve'echad. It means to say that if the majority of all 3 strings were snapped, then you have a problem. When I went to Shmuel, he disagrees. He says, Amarli, he says, Michti, look, we have 3 to work with, right? Plus Sahab, we have 3. So if you have a third remaining from each one, add it up, and get you a full one, that's okay. And that's a Raya Masayel Rav Noi. That is consistent with Rav Noi's quote of Shmuel, the Amar Rav Noi Shmuel, Tamagidin Sha'amru, regarding the remaining Tamagidin, I feel the Nishtar Bel Kuchot Asar Bel Ksherim, you just have 1, the size of this woolen thread, it's okay. Okay, continues the Gemara. Nishbaretz. We're up to the last halach in the Mishnah, which discusses a broken bone. Wasn't amputated, it was just broken through. An open fracture. Mishnah says if it's mostly covered by the basar, he's still inside and he's covered by the shechita of the animal. Now, the Mishnah doesn't really define the location of this break. Amar Rav lamala min arkuva depends again where in the hind leg. If it was above the arkuva, above that first joint, so it depends. That's a critical area, right? If it's fully amputated, animal's a treifa, according to that first version of Rav. So now, if it's just broken through an open fracture, imroiv habasar kaim, if most of the flesh around it is still intact and still sort of encased, zev is a mutter. The animal is okay. The dangling limb is still going to be covered by the shechita, perfectly fine. Bim lav, but otherwise not fully, mostly encased. Zev is a aser. It's as though it was amputated, no different. The animal is a treifa, and the leg cannot be eaten. But if this break is located below that knee, if it's mostly covered by flesh, the animal is safe, the limb is safe. Otherwise, the limb, the dangling limb, is considered disconnected, and it's the animal is still safe because it's not in a critical area. Okay, so again, according to Rav, a fully broken bone, if the rave of the basar around it is still okay, so then everything's okay. But otherwise, if it's above the arkuva, the animal's a treifa. And if it's below the arkuva, the animal's okay, but the aver is going to be also. Shmuel disagrees. He says, even if it's above the joint, it's not like an amputated leg, which makes the animal a treifa, it's just a break. Shmuel Amar, bein lamalo, bein lamata, whether it's above or below, if it's mostly covered by flesh, okay, then we're okay. Zev is a mutter, that's, no contest there. But even otherwise. So it's not covered, it's not protected. The aver is aser, I agree the aver is aser, it's aver min achai. But ubehima materis doesn't affect the health of the animal to the extent to make it a treifa. Even though it's above the knee. It's not like an amputation. Maskevla Rav Nachman says a kasha, l'shmuel, according to Shmuel, how could you have the leg forbidden and the animal okay? I mean, if it's disconnected, then the animal is a treifa. People are going to say, Aver mimenu mutar b'ashpa. The leg of this animal is sitting in the garbage. Umuteres, and the animal's okay? How can you have it both ways? I don't understand your question. According to Rav, you can ask the same thing. Below the knee. Fine, not above the knee, but below the knee. Rav says, likewise, if the basar doesn't cover, the behemoth is okay, but the aver is aser. So you have this discrepancy between the animal and the aver. Likewise, according to Rav, you can pose the same irony. People are going to say, aver menamutal b'ashpa, the leg is sitting in the garbage, and the animal is okay. Amalei, he says, big difference. We all know it's not a critical area. It's not a question. I meant to say like this. I'm focusing on Shmuel, who's permitting the animal, even though this severe break took place in a very critical area above the knee, where if it was amputated, it would generate treifa, right? So in this case, when it's broken through and through, and the aver is aser, the animal will be mutter. I mean, if it's disconnected, then it's like an amputation. That's what I mean to ask. I mean to ask like this: aver shechaya mimena, the limb from which the animal derives life sustenance, meaning it's critical to the vitality of the animal. It's further up on the leg. Mutar b'ashpa, that leg is now dangling and we're throwing it in the garbage. It's disconnected. Umuteres, and the animal's still okay. It's not a treif. How could you say that? In fact, they sent a message from the yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. Hilchasa, they accept that halacha is kabasei the Rav like Rav. But then they switched it. Hadu sholcha, they sent another telegram. Kabasei the Shmuel like Shmuel. And then they sent yet a third telegram back to Rav. Hadu sholcha, kabasei the Rav. Now the animal becomes treifa. Ve'eva atzma mitama b'masan. The aver is aver menachai. It's even though the shkita was done to the behemoth, it doesn't matter. The animal, the aver is aver menachai. person carries it, it becomes tummy. Moshe Rav Chisda. How could you say that a dangling limb is not covered by the shechita? We had this whole discussion the other day where we proved otherwise. We had a Mishnah, we had a whole discussion about this already. Moshe Rav Chisda, law, you're right, that was back on the Gimel over there. Meir says to Chachamim, without going into the whole back and forth, but just to excerpt this part of the argument, he says, Loim tihara shchita streifa oisa. You can't compare it to a case where an animal which was a treifa and then experienced shchita, that shchita will benefit it and protect it from becoming tamei, whether it's the animal itself, whether it's a dangling arm, because it's davar shagufa, it's part of its own self. How could you extend it to the uber, right? Remember, to tire so uber, to say that it also benefits the unborn, davar shagufa, which is not part of itself. Okay, in any case, the Bryce is clearly making a reference to a consensus halacha that the shechita of an animal covers the dangling arm as well. Amalei Rabbi says, why do you have to go to the Bryce? So we have a Mishnah which says the same thing as well. Haduri apircha, looking around for kashas, for sources, for questions. Why bother? We have a Mishnah which says the same thing, which seems to say that the shechita of an animal covers even the dangling arm. Nishchata behema, the behema with the dangling materials was shechted. Those are not considered Eiver Ben Achai. They're covered by the Shechita. In fact, they're considered like food, and they can become tummy if in fact they had hechsher. How do they have hechsher? How do they get exposure to liquid? Because of the blood of the Shechita. Clearly, they're not going to be Eiver Ben Achai. Eiver Ben Achai doesn't need hechsher, so clearly it's just a plain flesh. There was no hechsher, but in any case, clearly it's not considered Eiver Ben Achai, otherwise there would be no need for hechsher. Amalei says, you know what, I'll tell you why I didn't go to the Mishnah. The Mishnah wasn't so clear. Regarding the Mishnah, we could resolve it the way we did the other day. We tried to, you can get around it. But the Bryce is very clear that the shechita of the animal will cover and address and accommodate even a dangling arm to prevent it from becoming Eiver Ben Achai. Kisol Rav Zera. When Rav Zera traveled up to Eretz Yisrael, Ashkechei, who did he meet? Rav Yirmiyah. The Yosef Kam Lashmaiti was saying over this halacha in the name of Rav, as we said before, if it was broken further up, it's a treif. Amalei, he says to him, Rav Zera tells Rav Yirmiyah, yeah, Yishar, yeah, right on, perfect. V'chein Tergema Aryech Bebavli. You should know that Aryech, it's a term for Shmuel. Why was it called Aryech? Rashi brings that Aryech was one of the kings discussed in Bereshis Yudalit. And we always pass like Shmuel regarding matters of halacha, regarding matters of dini, of dini mamanis. So that's why he's called Aryech, like a king. So Aryech actually learned the Mishnah likewise, just like Rav, back in Bavli. V'chein tirgum Aryech b'Bavli. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? Who's Aryech? Aryech Mani, that's Shmuel. Shmuel disagreed with Rav just a minute ago. Aryech Mani Shmuel v'miflik palag. He disagreed. What do you mean he? Says the word Hadar be Shmuel gabe Rav. Ultimately, he conceded to Rav, and he agreed that in this case, where there was a full break further up on the hind leg, and it's not properly enclosed by flesh, not only is the limb out of bounds, but the animal itself becomes a treif. Okay, this is all provided that it's not properly encased, but otherwise it's okay. Now, what's considered properly encased? The Mishnah gives us a definition. If it's mostly covered. So the break is mostly covered, they'll protect it, it can recover and heal. Tanurabanan. So now we're going to get to the specifics of what's considered mostly covered. Tanurabanan. Nishbar ha'etzem. The bone broke through, with a clean open fracture. V'yatzel l'chutz, and it's visible. So the face of the fracture is now sticking out. Im oiru basar chayfinis ruboy. If you have skin and basar covering most of it, mutter, then it's okay, it's still healable. Imlav, otherwise asr. V'kama rubai, what's considered most? You can speak about most of the face. So let's say this is the bone, and it cracks. So you have the face of the fracture of the break, or you have the circumference of the bone. V'kama rubai, ki asr of dimi, when he came, Amar b'yechon, quotes Rabbi Yechon Oivyai. Most of the oivya, the thickness, the face of the crack. V'amrilah, and some have a different opinion, which is that it's roiv kefa, most of the circumference around the bone. Rav Papa says, okay, if we have both opinions, we got to cover both. Hilkach be'inan roiv avyai Rav Aviv Ruin, Rav Kev require both, most of the face and most of the circumference. Amar Ula, Amar B'Yechon. And what about, we speak about being covered. Covered by what? Covered by basar. What if it's covered by skin? Can that also regenerate growth and heal it? Amar Ula, Amar B'Yechon, yeah, basar. Skin of the animal has the same status as basar. If it's covering, it's okay. Amar Rav Nachman Ula, so he turns to Ula, he says, you're being very lenient. You're saying that skin itself can regenerate growth. Why don't you say at least require it to be 50-50? The skin can sort of, compensate for the missing flesh. It's 50% flesh, so another little bit, 50% of the skin can do it some good. I mean, but to say that just skin alone can do the job, that's a big stretch. The Mishnah says Oirubasa. The Bryce, which sounds like it has to be a combination. You can't just strictly use oir. It's not going to do the job. He says we have a different version of the Bryce. Non oir oy basar tani. By us, it says one or the other. So one or the other can do the job. Tanina. There was a different version of Amar Ula Amar B'Yechon oir mitzdaref lebasar. Yeah, that in fact in this, according to this version, it's only mitzdaref, which means if you have 50% of the basar, so the other 50% could be the skin to sort of shore it up. Amalei Rav Nachman Ula, that's also being very lenient. Even 50% skin can do the job. Why don't you say, it can only shore it up. If you have a majority of flesh, 51%, so okay. So the minority portion of skin, it can sort of work together with it. But you're going 50%, that's a lot. Amalei says, listen, I'll tell you a story. I know about a story. There was this young pigeon, whatever, this bird, Dava Bei Rabbi Yitzchak, that came to Rabbi Yitzchak, the Oyer Mitzdaref Lebasar, Hava. So it was in the house of Rabbi Yitzchak, and he had a shaila on his bird, the Oyer Mitzdaref Lebasar Hava. He had a break on the bone, and the break was protected, was covered, mostly covered by a combination of Oyer and Basar, 50-50. Basar came to Rabbi Yechon as a shaila. Actually, he said it's okay. So you see, 50% skin is okay. He says, how can you prove from a bird? A bird's skin is not like an animal skin. It's soft, pliable. It's like almost like flesh. Of course, it can work together and regenerate. Regrow the cells. But to take that to apply to an animal, that's already a stretch. Amalei says, Bar Goizela, this little bird. You're talking about a bird. Bar Goizela, the rachich. Bar Goizela, which is soft to begin with, shiny. That's very different. The Rus says you can use that amount of skin to regenerate proper growth and heal the open fracture of a behemoth. Okay, so in today's daf we covered 3 aspects of leg injuries by an animal. The first case was an amputation, nechtechu ragleh. If it's above the arkuba, it's treifa. Below that, it's kosher. Next case is tzemes hagidin that were snapped. We discussed the exact location of tzemes hagidin and to what extent it was damaged. What makes it a treifa. We also discussed the third case, which is nishbar etzem. There was just a clean break without an amputation. We had Rav's opinion, Shmuel's opinion, in terms of where it happened, and the saving grace would be if it's covered by oirubasa. And the question was, what proportion of each is required? All the best to you, and atzlach.